What is the two-mind method? At the most basic level, the two-mind method is what worked for me. I had a whole lifetime of like extreme dysregulation, toxic relationships, lots of emotional volatility, dissatisfaction with life, depression, anxiety, the works. And when I went to go seek help, there were elements of it, just tragic, really, because it's like I could see that the therapist had a great heart, and I could see that they even cared about me and wanted improvement. But the degree of dysregulation that I had and the way that it was controlling me was just, it was at an 11 a lot of the time. And so I would step into these therapeutic engagements multiple different times across multiple different providers and multiple different modalities. And I would leave unsatisfied after 6 months or a year or whatever. So I'm sitting there and my brain's being like, there has to be a solution for this. There has to be a solution for this. And I start reading and researching and watching videos and reading books and eventually getting to academic papers and I would learn all these things about attachment theory and brain physiology and that kind of stuff. And eventually I started getting out further away from kind of mainstream and discovering these like really neat, smart people that are my heroes now that are doing research about, some aspect of human behavioral psychology or brain work. And I was just like, wow, that really helps me understand all this other stuff I've been gathering in my brain. And over time, about 3 or 4 years worth, wow, more than that, probably more like 5 years worth, like there was these themes and these ways that stuff started to connect. And between like the way trauma shows up, or maybe even the way trauma forms, and then the way that it shows up when I'm having a major attachment panic. And it's just like, okay, well, we have this term for trauma and we have this term for attachment. And there's even a couple of people talking about the idea of attachment trauma. And it's just like, but are these even more deeply connected? And I would ask that question and I would look more and go more deeply. At least I was pursuing it for my own selfish means, right? Because it's like, I want answers. I want to have a different life. I want to make it through these dark times and be in a different place. I want to have a different lived experience. And I was pretty tenacious in that. And in being tenacious, I was also very kind of, rigid in, of course, trauma creates rigid thinking. But I mean, I was rigid in the requirements for entry, basically. So if someone showed up with just platitudes or, some kind of wishy-washy modality that is like, well, just do these things and feel better. And I'd say, well, I can see that it may have felt better for you, but how did you get there? And they couldn't really describe the mechanistic process of getting from point A to point B. I come from an engineering background, and if you can't explain how the process works, you don't know what the process is, right? And that means you can't reproduce it. You don't know the meticulous details of what to do when the process doesn't go the way you expect it to, because you're just like, stuff comes in one side and it pops out the other side. And when it pops out good, we're like, hooray. And when it pops out bad, we're like, sorry, we don't know what happened. That's what going to therapy felt like quite a few times. So over the years, what happened is that I would find a new piece of data and I would make a new connection and I would say, and I get all excited about it. And, I'd kind of cherish it close to my heart and begin integrating it into my life. And some of them would have forward progress and others would kind of fall flat. And I was kind of tracking all this inside my head. And when it started to connect together in ways that reinforced each other, like I start building this theory about what trauma is, how it functions, like this concept of the two minds, and then the attachment theory, the 5 pillars are kind of the 3 main cornerstones. And when those started linking together in ways that were just super elegant, clean, concise, the excitement goes high. And of course, I'm in an excited state, and people go to a party, people get to talking about their life process, challenges, all that, whatever. People ask me what I do, and I'm just like, well, I spend a lot of time doing this. And then they're curious and they ask more questions, and I answer from the point of view of what I've been learning. And then more and more ears start perking up, and more and more people start collecting around. And, it was like there's this one particular week where it was like 4 or 5 different social events in a single week. And in every event, there was someone that was like, hold on a second. And they grab a notebook and they come out and they're basically writing down some quote of something that I just said. And I was like, this is happening every time I go someplace. Maybe there's something here that other people want to hear. So I started hosting small social gatherings where I live and just inviting a couple of these people that were interested. These turned into weekly talks, talking about a whole host of issues, people bringing their questions, me explaining it through this lens that I have. I went through a whole coaching certification program, and then I'm talking to other students in the program, and they're just like, you're discussing things that were never discussed in the program, but they make total sense, and I want to know more. So that was all very exciting and fun. Eventually, there came a time when one of my friends that was coming to these weekly talks tells me, I've been to hundreds of dating events all around here and all around the world, really, and nobody is saying the things that you're saying. Would you please get up on stage? And so they found me a stage and they found a venue, and we organized a weekly talk. And I said, okay, let's go test this in front of the masses, because if this doesn't work, if these theories are too siloed into my particular experience, then it's going to fall flat, right? Or it's only going to resonate with a little group of people. So let's go test it. Let me go put myself on display so that people who are more educated, more smarter than I am, have a chance to push back and challenge me on these ideas. And so I did that. And the degree of challenge and pushback was incredibly small. But what happened was the degree of resonance and thankfulness and gratitude, and people coming up and were coming back later, weeks later, and saying, thank you so much. Like, what I learned in your class has fundamentally changed my relationship, or fundamentally changed the way I connect with myself. Or one moment I'm particularly proud of, it like fundamentally changed her relationship with her own son. And I'm just like, okay, this is working. So now I need to take this complex network of ideas in my head, and I need to codify it and turn it into something I can teach. Because it's already, I'm teaching from everything I say in these videos and in online classes and speaking gigs and everything else. Everything I say is being informed by this framework that lives up in my brain about what are the two minds and how they operate, including the different memory systems and the different like kind of motivation systems, survival responses, all that kind of stuff. The brain physiology of threat response and stress hormones and all that. The what is trauma and how it forms, how it's involved with the sleep cycle, which I just shot a video on that one, which should be live by now. And then this whole thing with the 5 pillars of attachment. I mean, attachment theory in general, but the way that Daniel P. Brown kind of presented this concept of 5 fundamental traits that are needed. And then even underneath that, the want to, choose, and prioritize thing, that one's mine. And then there's this whole other aspect about traumatic activation, which I don't talk about much yet because it's still kind of in the refinement phase. So that's what the two mind method is. Two mind method is a collection of ideas and theories that fundamentally changed my life, and they consistently change the lives of the people I work with. And when a person signs up to come work with me, I listen to their story and we ask a few questions to try to get an idea of the status of their nervous system, how their attachment system is the likely formation of their attachment system based upon the evidence we have, and how it connects to kind of like larger attachment archetypes. And then from that point of view, I start making guesses about their lived experience, especially in relationship, but kind of in the face of any stress. And so we're testing the theories. If the tests come out positive, that it like my internal model of their attachment system is close to accurate, or at least presenting as mostly accurate, then I start making predictions about how certain types of stresses or interactions are going to affect them. And when those predictions play out mostly accurately, then that reinforces the idea that the model I have of their attachment dynamics is actually accurate. And then from there we say, okay, if this is what's going on inside your attachment system, then this is actually how we see improvement, is we need to create a stress and recovery in this particular way. Okay, so I've talked a lot about how I came to the 2Mind method and how I use it. Well, people are still asking, well, what is it? It's a therapeutic model, really. It is a framework of theories that fit together, kind of interlocking pieces, almost like Lego, and it explains what is happening inside a person's nervous system in a given moment of stress, and how it's not just a given moment, it's over time. Because if we look at a specific moment, we can make pretty accurate predictions about things that have happened in the past. And when we know things in the past, we can make pretty accurate predictions about things that are happening in the present day and in the future. Because there's a mechanistic aspect to it, meaning cause and effect relationships along a long chain, like a mechanism. This kind of stress will usually create this kind of response. But of course, that's true for people that have this prior kind of response. So this kind of stress early leads to this kind of nervous system response, different coping mechanisms, survival strategies, emotional activations, likelihood of anger versus depression, et cetera, et cetera. That stress leads to this response. But now you're in a situation where you have this response inside you. And then that response combined with this other stress is going to lead to this other situation. And then another one, and then another one, and another one. And there's kind of this like long chain of events that leads to the present moment where I'm with my partner, and if partner yells at me or says a couple of words, my entire emotional system gets massively triggered, and then I lose my mind and act out in all these unhelpful ways. And so a lot of it is like, you could call it behavioral psychology, whatever. I'm not sure what you want to call that. But it's how accurately can we kind of zero in on each given stress response moment. And that's a key part of it, is that we need to zero in on specific stress response moments. And then from that, we get an idea and an image of what's going on inside your nervous system, because we can ask the question, why did you choose that response over a different one? Why did you choose anger instead of depression? Well, it's not you, it's the subconscious, right? Why did you choose running away instead of eating a bowl of ice cream? And we can ask these questions for every little dynamic, and there's answers to all of them. And the more that we begin to understand the answers, the more that we begin to understand kind of the entire decision matrix that's going on underneath the surface. And once we have that, we can accurately predict your future, because we can accurately predict the motivating forces. Once we can accurately predict the motivating forces, we can say, oh, this is how we rewire it. It's literally like understanding the nature of the problem reveals the answer to the problem. Every once in a while I get a naysayer. Someone says like, no, that's not possible. Every person's unique and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, sure. If that's what you want to believe, then I'm not your person. Like, there's lots of people for you. Go there instead. Because like this system that I'm using has fundamentally changed my life. And it's now I've got a growing list of people whose lives have been fundamentally changed by it also. And it's like, and I'm extremely confident in it, even though only certain aspects have rigid academic studies behind them. A lot of it is still theoretical. And so I am operating in this space that maybe certain types of academia and clinical therapy can't operate. I don't know. But a lot of it's theoretical. I try to help people understand that early on in the process. But you know what happens? They don't care. They're not looking for theory and, you know, academic pedigree and all that other crap. What they're looking for is they're looking for help. And it's like, can this help me? And it's like, let's see, right? Usually, yes. It's rare, really rare, that I've been in any situation where it has not been able to help a person. And to be honest, and I don't want to point fingers or call anybody out, but the thing that makes it not work is the stubbornness of the individual. If I believe I'm fully right and I refuse to change my perspective on myself or the victim narrative or any of that other stuff, if I refuse to budge on my assessment of what's going on in my life, well, you're going to refuse to budge. No amount of treatment or help is going to come save that. So there are cases where what I do and how I help people doesn't land. But it's almost, I've never seen it be the cause of the theories. I've only seen it be the resistance of the individual. Now, maybe my data set is still too small. Say that with any kind of absolute terms. I'm fine with that. We're still testing and trying here. So, fundamental aspects of the 2-mind method. It's 2 minds, conscious, subconscious. They operate differently. They have different motives. They have different survival patterns. They have different memory systems. Like, they operate differently. And it is likely connected to the theory that the brain evolved in kind of 3 different phases. And so the subconscious being limbic system and below, kind of the earliest stages, and the midbrain, and then the conscious mind being the most recent new neocortex and limbic system. So it's like the third layer talks to the second layer, and that seems to be kind of conceptually where the conscious mind lives. And the mid layer talks to the first layer, and that seems to be kind of where the subconscious lives in general. But the way that they have different memory systems and survival patterns and conceptual awareness, they have different skills. Language lives in one, it doesn't live in the other. Cause and effect relationships is in one, not the other. Yeah, there's narrative memory versus associative memory. These differences matter. So that's why I call it the 2-mind method. I mean, I needed a name, right? And I went through half a dozen different ideas until I said, okay, I'm always talking about how the 2 minds are critical in understanding this stuff. So let's just put it in the name. Great. Second bit is the attachment system. I started in attachment theory. It has been fundamentally critical in my understanding of how these things work. It's probably the most accurate psychological model I've ever encountered, meaning it's the most predictive, I guess, is the way to say that, is that this thing, you can understand a dynamic from a childhood and you can make very accurate predictions about the future and vice versa, is incredible. So kind of start from there. And I started in the kind of the whole 4-quadrant model, secure, anxious, preoccupied, fearful, avoidant, dismissive, avoidant. But once I went through that book by Daniel Brown and then some additional research stuff, I began to understand that that's just one way of looking at it. There's a lot of very smart people that have created different models of approaching the situation. And then that was kind of happening at the same time as that I was analyzing my own path through this journey and realizing that one of the key pieces that didn't come up in discussion, this blows my mind. One of the most crucial aspects to the whole attachment theory discussion that didn't come up in any of my training or discussion was just how much everything was being motivated by fear. And it's we got all these fancy models and names and everything else to describe this experience. And it's like, oh, I'm going to assess this person as anxious and that guy's disorganized and blah, 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 blah. But it's just like, they're all reacting to this fundamental terror that lives inside about being in a situation where they have to face uncomfortable emotions. Like, that's universal across the board. So why do we have all these like fancy different names for it? If that's true, and I look at it through that lens now, then it seems to be that, like, okay, you've got whatever attachment styles and behavioral responses that you've adopted over the years. But if we could get underneath all that and just focus on how you respond to a particular stress that creates a sense of fear, wouldn't that be useful? So I began exploring that theory for a while, and that's been incredibly fruitful. So that's a fundamental cornerstone underneath the entire pyramid of attachment theory, is that it's like we can talk about all this other stuff, which gives us really nice predictive models. But what we're doing there is we're trying to hone in on what your specific fear is, because chances are when you have that fear, you've found a lot of ways to block it out and numb it and kind of pretend like it doesn't exist. So most of the time you ask a person what they're afraid of and they will not actually give you a very good answer, either none or one that's completely inaccurate or kind of like totally off to the side, and be like, yeah, but look at your behavioral responses. Every aspect of your behavioral responses points to this idea that you're terrified of this. And if you can do that and their nervous system reacts, you know you found something, and be like, this is where we need to do the work. It's not some high level, oh, you're avoidant or anxious or whatever. It's that, no, you have this specific fear for whatever reason, right? And this fear does not make you avoidant. It's that your avoidant behavior patterns are a response to this terror that lives inside you. And that person's anxious behavior patterns are a response to that terror that lives inside them. So let's solve the terror and the behavioral responses go away. And that's exactly how it works. Like 100%, not even a question anymore. Solve the fear, you solve the attachment dynamics. And it's just like, oh. And then through that lens, we say, oh, well, then the people that are secure just aren't afraid. Kind of. It's not that they don't have fear. It's that they've either not had to face that stress, in which case we don't know their fear response yet, or they have faced a continuous degree of fears and then processed them to the point where they're no longer fearful, which means their capacity for stress and fear has raised up significantly higher than the average. So that's kind of the attachment mode, the attachment pillar, cornerstone. And then there's the two-mind cornerstone, and then there's the trauma cornerstone, which I just shot a video on. Those three together kind of create a very comprehensive framework of theories that explain human behavioral responses, not just behavioral responses, but nervous system responses. It's not just my nervous system is dysregulated, it's why is your nervous system dysregulated. The theoretical framework that sits up here in the two-mind method is explaining the why and the how of emotional activations, dysregulation, why the dysregulation happens, what a dysregulation like that will cause down the road, how certain types of numbing are being caused by certain types of fears. So there's this like fear, dysregulation, numbing, triangle maybe. And then of course how that, that's all just inside one person. Now we add romance to it, or any kind of human relation, and now we've got two people, and then they're doing the same thing, and they're off sync with each other, and then they smash into each other. And then you end up at a place where this person's dysregulation and then behavioral response then comes across, which now this person interprets it in a particular way because of their lived experiences and stress responses. And then that causes a dysregulation on this side. And then we have trauma ping pong. Right? That's what the two-mind method is. It's a collection of theories. And those theories inform my mind to create an increasingly accurate model of the state of your nervous system and your attachment dynamics. And then we go through a process of discovering those with more and more pointed atomic specificity until we can reliably create moments where your terror takes over. And when we can do that, we understand what's going on. And we can go both directions. We can say, oh, this terror that lives inside you is going to cause all these behavioral dynamics. And oh, look, we see it again. And then they tell stories about their lives. And it's like, oh, yeah, that one connects. This one connects. That one connects. Look, we've got this one thing. And I'll tell you, you do that with a person, they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel validated, they feel like this like release of tension inside them comes out, and they're just like, oh my God, it's not that I'm crazy. It's that just like I've got this terror that lives inside me and it's been pushing me around for years. And, I've seen people with substance abuse problems and toxic relationships and all degrees of self-sabotage in their life and everything, the whole gamut. And then when you can help that person understand that all these behaviors that you're engaging in, like compelled to do and you don't like about your life, and all of that comes back to this one nugget of nervous system's response to fear or a threatening event or threatening idea, threatening emotional experience. They're just like, wow. And then what happens is integration begins. Their brain begins going like this massive Rubik's Cube, putting pieces together and then shifting things around and rolling. And they're just like, oh my God. And then you see them and they're just in this place of like revelation after revelation after revelation. It's a very fun experience. It's one of the reasons I love my work. And they go through this series of revelations and it's just like, okay. And now you kind of got to back off and let them process and integrate the way that arising for them, really. And then there's just a little bit of tending, I guess might be the word. Like there's a little bit of a tending, guiding thing I do during that phase because there's so much misinformation on the internet and people will show up to me with all this bullshit inside their brain about narcissist this and victim that and blah, 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 right? Not saying narcissism doesn't exist. It does. I had a whole video on that one. But it's like they've got all this misinformation in their brain, and that misinformation will lead them down an unhelpful path with that, which then they're going to have to like go reverse course and then reintegrate a different thing. So there's kind of this tending in there as they're going through the integration process to be like, wait, don't fall into this narrative that you're powerless. Don't fall into this place where, they're this big evil bad guy that's been manipulating your life the whole time, even when that's true, like when that's an actual thing that happens, that model of thought just keeps the nervous system messed up. We need to bring that person to a place of power and agency. So even when they're in the face of someone who's truly manipulative and destructive and whatever, it's like we want to guide them to a place that maximizes their confidence and agency and power and joy in life. And so there's a little bit of tending in that. And that's kind of, I think that's connected to the theory framework. I'm not sure. That might just be more the therapeutic relationship stuff. So that's a quick overview of what the two mind method is, how it kind of came to be, how it lives inside my mind, how I use it to help people. And I have a big dream in my heart of teaching this to others because this is the model, this is the approach that I needed when I was in my darkest times. And if I needed it, I know there's hundreds of thousands of others that need it. And I don't want this to be an indictment or condemnation of the traditional therapeutic model or anything like that. It like, I don't know. Like, honestly, it's like I'm in this space and I don't think about the outside world that much because I'm trying to make this space and this approach and this model be as effective and clear and concise as possible, as helpful as possible, as therapeutic as possible. And so I sit here and I do this. And when the critics come, I'm just like, sure, like bring it, but I only have a limited amount of time to process what you're saying. Like if this is helping people consistently, then that's where I want to be. And I don't care what the critics say. I don't care what academia says. I don't care about any of that, right? Are people being helped? Yes, consistently. Then stay on course. And that's what led me here. Creating this channel, creating these videos, and speaking to you guys. So that's how that works. And hopefully in the next year, you're going to be hearing announcements about a course or program or some kind of opportunity where we can assemble a cohort of students and I can do this transmission of knowledge and get them trained up so that we can have more and more practitioners of the 2 Mind method all around the world. I've already tried once. I tried one cohort. We learned a lot about what works and what doesn't work. I basically have one apprentice that has my stamp of approval. She's not quite confident enough yet to go out there in the world and start practicing, but she's got all the theory in her head and her approach is stellar. And I hope you guys get a chance to meet her someday. So I'm hoping that by 1 year's time from now, we'll have an entire army of people practicing the 2 Mind method and helping others go through their darkest times. Okay, guys, thank you much. Peace.